Okay, first let's get this out of the way. All of my channels and all my videos are age restricted. You have to be an adult, 18 years or over. So if you're not, get out of here. I have to do that because YouTube's is making you do it. Here are my other YouTube channels. I'd like for you to subscribe to a couple if you get anything out of this. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. That's my cat's Facebook page if you're interested. I'm also on Vimeo. And I would appreciate it if you'd share this and like this. So we're going to talk a little bit. I get this a lot from people that even take astronomy courses. Well, we bounce lasers off the moon. That proves that they put that reflector there with the Apollo 11 lander. Well, I want you to keep this in mind. I want you to set up this experiment in your backyard. So Ward Heinrich was kind enough to loan me, or to give me, this little model of the moon. It's a very good model of the moon. And I've got that at 50 of its diameters to the Earth. That's how far it is if you're using moon diameters back to your starting point. If you're making an Earth to the moon, it's only 30 diameters because the Earth's larger. I'm using all NASA numbers on this. Now, something you need to keep in mind, these people that say that they're bouncing a laser off the reflector and that's proving it, they're delusional. Reason being, if you look in a 1965 National Geographic and just do a search for it, in 1962 they were bouncing lasers off the moon. Now in that article, in National Geographic said it was 2 miles radius. That's how wide the laser was when it actually struck the moon and came back. So I'm going to err on the side of caution and say that normally these astronomers are firing lasers twice as strong. The laser they fired was a ruby red laser. It was a very strong laser. It was about the strongest one they had at the time. So let's say but this is the 1 square mile radius laser. That's how many square feet are in it at 1 mile. Now remember, they said it was 2 miles when it hit the moon back in 62. That's how many square feet are in 1 square mile radius. 27,878,400 square feet. If you look at a picture of the reflector on the moon, it's 2 feet by 2 feet. What percentage of this square foot energy is hitting that reflector and coming back? It's so infinitesimally small, and they're saying that goes 240,000 miles and then comes back and you can read it. No. Another thing you need to keep in mind, the Sea of Tranquility is a natural looking reflector. It's a depression, which, if you think about it, the Sea of Tranquility is a crater, and it's a natural depression it's 200 miles across. That is your reflector. It is not, I repeat, it is not the 2 foot by 2 foot reflector that Apollo left on the moon. Remember, aluminum reflects really good, but it doesn't reflect 100%. Remember, that thing's been up there supposedly 50 years. There's going to be a little bit of dust getting into it, so it's not even reflecting as good as it did day one. Everything tends to decay. Second law of thermodynamics. Let's keep some of this stuff here in mind. The moon is on average 240,000 miles away. Light travels 186,000 miles in a vacuum. Now remember, there's air molecules as you leave the Earth and come back to the Earth. They're slowing the light particles down just a little bit, not much, but let's throw something else in there. If you're standing at the North Pole, it takes you, there's a spot somewhere on the Earth, if you go by the standard model, that it takes you all day to do 1 revolution. And they say that the Earth is rotating at 1,004 miles an hour at the equator. So you have to figure out where you are, and you're going to have to put your acceptor to catch it. Now, it's the same thing coming back as it was back then, 12 miles across. So you've got some play to go with, but the people that are putting the reflector right next to where they shot it, they're not getting it. They're confusing themselves. They're actually hitting the Sea of Tranquility and it's bouncing back. So let's walk over to the moon from our Earth. So like I said, if you're using the Earth to set up the moon, it would be 30 diameters. If you were setting the moon to the Earth, it would be 50 moon diameters. So what's going on here is they're firing a reflector. They're firing a laser at the moon, and it is bouncing off of the... kind of moved on me. They're firing off of the Sea of Tranquility, and the Apollo lander was right about there. So that's, and like I said, Ward Heinrich donated this moon to me for some videos, and I appreciate it. So they're convincing themselves they're hitting this 2 foot by 2 foot reflector, and the energy that's coming off of that infinitesimally small thing from a 1 mile across radius laser. Like I said, the ones they did in the 60s were 2 mile, and they were strong lasers, is hitting the 2 foot by 2 foot, and it's reflecting enough energy to come back 240,000 miles back to the Earth. So what's actually happening is, I'm reiterating this, they're bouncing lasers off of the moon just like they did in 1962, listed in National Geographic, and they're convincing themselves that they're hitting a 2 by 2 reflector, and it's reflecting enough energy to be read on Earth. That's a lie. And remember, the only people that have gone through the Van Allen radiation belt are the Apollo astronauts, not Apollo-Soyuz. Every other mission was well below the Van Allen radiation belt. The International Space Station's at 200 miles. Apollo-Soyuz approximately the same. The Skylab, the Mir, they were all below the Van Allen radiation belt. The only people that have gone through the Van Allen radiation belt are the Apollo astronauts. And strangely enough, every single one of them was a Freemason, because Freemasons can keep a secret. We have to keep it up because that's the greatest achievement the U.S. supposedly likes to hang with. That we landed a man on the moon. It was just to beat the Russians, but we got to keep it up here. So how many PhDs have been handed out for Apollo data, which the original, by the way, they've lost all the data. And if you do a search for Don Pettit, a space shuttle supposed astronaut, he says, I'd go back to the moon in a nanosecond, but we lost the technology. Really, you lost the technology. Stanley Kubrick was hired to fake the moon landing, and all the lunar landings supposedly happened during the Nixon administration. We've never been back to the moon. I'd like for you to look up Project Orion and do a search on it, either the Discovery or the Learning Channel. They're interviewing the guy, and he goes, well, we gotta shoot the Orion up there because it's got to go through this dangerous, the Van Allen radiation belt, and it's dangerous areas of radiation, and we're gonna have to send it up without any people first. Well, finally, this reporter, smart guy, says, well, why don't you just, you know, the lunar equipment's at Houston, just get that, and there he kind of clams up. So we never landed human beings on the moon. Get over it, learn to think critically, and don't come up to me and tell me about how they can bounce a laser off the moon, because they can't. They can bounce it, but they're not bouncing it off that 2 by 2 foot reflector. If you actually believe that, you're an idiot. Bye.